All right, well, let's continue on. For some reason, the video just sort of shut off on its own. Anyway, back to this. We have a phase shift at pi over 3. So sine normally starts right on the origin, but for this one it's not because it's been moved over to the right by that amount, by pi over 3. So it's sitting over there. So we're still going to draw a nice little sine curve, but it's now starting at pi over 3. So the period is going to tell you where to stop. Just add the period to wherever you start, and that tells you where it ended up. So 2 pi plus pi over 3 is 7 pi over 3. And then it's bouncing in between -1 and 1. Okay, so not too bad. All right, let's look at this one. The amplitude is 4. The period, 2 pi divided by 3. And then the phase, if you set that equal to 0, x would come out to equal pi over 3. So it's going to shift it over to the right again by the exact same amount, by that pi over 3. All right, so it's got a negative sitting in front of the function, so it means it's flipped upside down. So just like that. So again, we are starting at that pi over 3, so to figure out where it stops, just add the period. So 2 pi over 3 plus pi over 3 is pi. And then what's in between them? 2 pi over 3. And then this is bouncing in between 4 and a -4. All right, not too bad. Okay, part C. Our amplitude is 7. The period, 2 pi over 2 pi. So the period is 1. And then the phase, if you set the angle equal to 0 and solve for x, the phase is going to equal -2. So now we're shifting it over to the left. And keep in mind that your phase is twice the size of the period, so when we're going to shift it over to the left, but the entire graph is going to be contained over there. So -2. Because if you added 1 to where we just started, that'd only get you to -1. Okay, and then what's in between those two numbers? -3 over 2. And then we are bouncing in between -7 and 7. All right, part D. Switch over to cosine. So our amplitude is 13, so big amplitude. The period, 2 pi over 1, so just 2 pi. And then the phase, set the angle equal to 0, so the phase is -pi over 4. So we are shifting it over to the left. And we're shifting a cosine curve over to the left. So its maximum value is over here at the -pi over 4. Okay, so take where we started, that -pi over 4, add the period to it. And that'll give us 7 pi over 4, and that's where we stop the curve. And then you can do that trick that we just did earlier in the previous section. You know, figure out what's in between them. So that would be 3 pi over 4 Another little trick that you can do too, especially when working with fractions, when the denominators are the same, you can just kind of work with the tops, and you can take the pi's off and just put it back into your answer. So really, you're asking yourself, what's in between -1 and 7? 3. And then slap a pi on it, and then stick it over 4. Okay, so then just figure out what's in between -1 and 3. That'd be a 1. So 1 pi over 4. And then in between 3 and 7, that'd be a 5. So 5 pi over 4. And there's your cosine curve. Okay, let's go ahead and finish off the cosine curves, and then the next video we'll deal with the other ones. Okay, part E. Our amplitude is 9. The period, 2 pi over 4. So the period is 8. And then the phase shift, if you set the angle equal to 0 and solve for x, the phase is going to be 1. So shift it over to the right. Okay, so you started at 1, add the period, so the period ended at 9. Figure out the middle. So what's in between 1 and 9? Well, that would be a 5. And in between 1 and 5 is usually 3. In between 5 and 9, most of the time that's 7. And then it's bouncing in between -9 and 9. Now, a few of you are probably thinking in your head and going, wait a minute, that curve's not right. And I would say you are correct. I would do this on the board too, just to see if people were paying attention. So why is this curve incorrect? Aha, it's got a negative sitting right in front of that function. So it shouldn't have been drawn this way. It should have been drawn upside down. Oops. So like that. So the correct curve is the green curve, not the blue one. I know, tricky. Okay, let's look at this last one. Example F, and then we'll switch gears one more time. Okay, so our amplitude is huge. Amplitude is 83. Period. 2 pi over 2 pi, so the period is 1. And then the phase, set the angle equal to 0, and the phase turned out to be 3. Oops. Okay, so it's a positive out in front, so we are starting at the top. And this is so not to scale, but that's okay. So we started at 3, add the period, so it stops at a distance of 4. The middle, that would be 7 over 2. And then in between 3 and 7 over 2, that would be 13 over 4. And then between 7 over 2 and 4, if you added those two guys up and divided by 2, so found the average, that would be 15/4. And then it's bouncing in between -83 and 83. Okay, so let's stop here and we'll do the rest of it in the next video.